Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to this special presentation on how to streamline procurement and increase buying power working with a GPO, or a group purchasing organization, presented by CoreTrust. Now, audience members are encouraged to ask questions at any time during this presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address your questions in a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So a group purchasing organization, or a GPO, aggregates the purchasing volume of its members for goods and services and develops contracts with suppliers that allow members to buy at group prices and terms. But GPOs continue to be widely misunderstood. Today, we're going to learn how a GPO can reduce procurement costs based on the collective buying power of its members, and why participating in a GPO gives companies a distinct strategic advantage. With that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. Trip Cates is Assistant Vice President of Development at CoreTrust, a leading sourcing agency with more than 2,800 members and 150 contracts across multiple indirect spend categories. Trip leads a team responsible for the firm's key strategic and national relationships and new category development within specific verticals. For CoreTrust, Trip's focus is on indirect supply chain procurement for products and services. Kyle Kramer is account manager at CoreTrust. He has more than 10 years of operational sales and leadership experience. His broad expertise allows him to bring understanding to the CoreTrust membership about current struggles in all facets of procurement. So with that, let's move into the panel discussion portion of our presentation. Welcome, Trip, and welcome, Kyle, as well. But I want to just start out by asking, let's start out with the whole idea of the so-called low-hanging fruit, the easy win categories, and how to pick them. Perhaps we could say, how do you go about doing that? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We need to do the presentation first before we get to the my error. We'll move into the panel after Trip's presentation. So Trip, introduce us to CoreTrust and give us an overview of the whole issue of GPOs.
Yes, thank you, Bob, and thanks everybody for joining today. Hopefully, we can walk through everything that helps you understand, how to work with the GPO and to have the understandings of how we work as well. And so as we're going to walk through everything you see on the agenda, we're going to introduce CoreTrust to you, what a group purchasing business model review looks like specifically to CoreTrust, some of the value-added tools that we use, as well as technology, the membership process, the member value, how all of that works. And then, like Bob mentioned, we'll go through some panel Q&A, as well as some audience Q&A at the end as we go through it. And then hopefully with that, then you guys can come out of here with a better understanding of again, how to work with the GPO and maximize our value. So to start off, who is CoreTrust? So CoreTrust is a commercial group purchasing organization, defined as a sourcing agency where we aggregate spend on behalf of our members. Then we use that aggregation then as leverage with our supplier community in order to obtain better terms and conditions and better pricing. Our membership makeup is of private equity firms, their portfolio companies, as well as probably most of our companies are mid to large corporations. Again, where we just bring all of that spend together, aggregate it, use that aggregation as leverage with our supplier community. So a little bit about us, like where we came from. So we started as all being a part of what's called HCA Hospitals. HCA Hospitals headquartered here in Nashville. It's the largest for-profit hospital company in the country. And throughout the years, there were a multitudes of reasons, and this is starting in the late 90s, that HCA had to divest several of their facilities. And then when the dust finally settled with all of that, there ended up being several companies that were formed in and around Nashville. And if you look at the perception of the buying power that these companies had, all used to being a part of a much larger corporation in HCA, and now they're much smaller. that perception of that buying power was diminished. So in order to keep that buying power together, a group purchasing organization called CoreTrust was formed in order to, because all these companies used to all be part of the same organization, they can now aggregate their own spend. This is everything from Band-Aids to MRI machines to rental car and literally everything else in between, in order to aggregate that spend and keep that buying power, even though they're all part of separate companies. So a separate legal organization, GPO, called CoreTrust was formed, and all those companies were ultimately buying off of those agreements. If you fast forward a few years, and a group of private equity firms purchased one of those members, they were a member of CoreTrust, and started to see behind the curtains all of the contracts that what we call indirect spend, all the contracts that they had in place that could be very beneficial to not only the organization that they were looking at, but also looking forward at what it could be for the rest of these private equity firms' portfolio companies. Well, at the time, CoreTrust was strictly a healthcare organization, and the membership was strictly for acute care providers. And so a separate operating division underneath CoreTrust was formed called CoreTrust. And it enabled us to add a whole different set of aggregation companies from what was typically all healthcare. And now you had some items, or all the items being indirect spend, but members that were non-healthcare. And all that did was help grow the spend in each of these categories, which when you're aggregating that spend together, and as those categories grow, your value grows. Your value proposition to not only your suppliers are growing, but to your potential members are growing as well. And so that's how CoreTrust was formed. Now let's fast forward to just a few years ago, and we were starting to reach over 2,000 members. The aggregated spend that we had in several of our contracts were getting into the hundreds of millions of dollars. We have a few that are in the billions of dollars. We have 80 plus contracts or had 80 plus contracts, and all of that made up the portfolio that we had that was roughly 10 billion in aggregated spend. Now, if we go to this past year, with the help of Blackstone, we have separated ourselves from CoreTrust and have now become our own standalone company. And it has enabled us to not only grow in categories that would be much more focused into what our membership is versus what some of that focus would be with healthcare. Now, we're still very much tied to CoreTrust in a few different ways, because the aggregation that both sides of our business play, well, we still need both sides of the membership in order to keep that. And so it's a great partnership that we're going to maintain, but also being a standalone company is going to be what CoreTrust needed in order to keep our membership and keep providing that savings and value to CoreTrust. To our members. All right. So now a group purchasing organization and the business model. Because I'm sure many of you have either worked with a GPO before, have heard of what a GPO does before, and then some of you may not have. And so what the business model is, with CoreTrust being, we're still a GPO on the commercial side, right? But what differentiates us from other commercial GPOs is some of these other GPOs are based on limited aggregation and limited commitment, right? With CoreTrust, we have a very dedicated and committed membership for when you when you opt into a category. There are some commitment levels that come with that. And it's by category only, right? So you're not buying in or not committing into the whole contract portfolio that we have. It's only the categories that you choose. Right? But that's where we could differentiate ourselves from that side. Now, on the consulting agency, let's say you have a category that you may not have the deep subject matter expertise that in-house, and so you need to third-party that out to a consulting group. It's an engagement that you're going to pay for through a fee, but also they're going to be building a contract on your behalf. But then when it's done and they're out of there, they're going to hand that contract over to you and expect you to manage an agreement that you did not build, don't know the insides and outs of, and just make that task a little bit more difficult. So where CoreTrust sits is, we like to say that we sit right in the middle between both of those, because yes, we are a commercial GPO, and yes, we are a GPO, but we also act as a consultant on behalf of our members because of the very broad portfolio that we have. We have a lot of categories that we refer to as our solutions categories that have that deep subject matter expertise in areas of facilities, in areas of food, hospitality, logistics, right? These are all areas where that deep subject matter expertise comes into play, and you as a member can use that as to your advantage. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, a very committed membership in the categories that we have. Therefore, the data that we were able to bring together and aggregate is second to none. So it enables us to maintain the best-in-class contracts that we have and that we build on behalf of our membership. And with that, we have a very high client retention. Once a member becomes a member of CoreTrust, they typically stay a member of CoreTrust. I've been here 10 years and not that many folks have left. So that's a very positive. All right. So now how all of this delivers value between all three the entities that come in here. So if you look at CoreTrust, right, we're not a middleman. You do have a direct relationship with the suppliers. And so what I want to quickly walk through is how this relationship works. So CoreTrust, we're the ones that hold the contract. So we do all the negotiations. We did the RFIs, we did the RFPs, and ultimately the award goes on CoreTrust paper when we are either adding a category or even renewing the categories that we currently have. So we hold all those agreements with those suppliers. There's also a governing document that governs the relationship that we have with our members. That's called our participation agreement. Right? That's it's the document that officially makes you a member, and it ties the two of us together and gives you access to all the agreements that we have in place. So now at the very back of our document, there's an exhibit in the back that is literally a checkbox, right? When you want to work on a certain category or opt into a certain category, you check a box. And as you check that box, that's what ties you to the master agreements that we have in place with our suppliers. And through that participation agreement, you are a third-party beneficiary to those contracts. So again, CoreTrust builds the categories. There's a document that governs our relationship called a participation agreement. That participation agreement is what ties you to our suppliers. So that's how all three of us, kind of all tie together. The way we build our categories, many of you, if not all of you, you have your stakeholders at your own organization. Our stakeholders are our members. And so when we are building a category and working through the details, we're the engine that runs the RFP, but just like you present the results to your stakeholders. We present our results to our stakeholders through an advisory board process. So whenever we're building a new category, advisory boards are formed by our members. Our members then are the ones that we will present the value of the RFP, but it's that advisory board member and our members are the ones that will opt into whether we do a sole source award or dual source award, depending on what that category is and what the needs of our membership. So that's kind of that tie to how everything gets put into place, that the categories that in contracts that we do hold, right? It's not CoreTrust that's making a lot of these decisions. It's our membership that's making a lot of these decisions. All right, so now some value-added tools that a GPO can bring. All right, so I mentioned earlier that we hold all these agreements together. They're all built on aggregation. Commitment may need to come into the contract, but that's how we're able to build everything, and that's what our portfolio says. Well, there's a lot of contracts that you have spend on that we do not have a GPO agreement for. And so several years ago, we invested in and started what we're calling CoreTrust Custom Sourcing in order for us to have a platform for our members that still have sourcing needs that they may not be able to get to, may not have the expertise that they would need in order to run it. And so we have this division again called CoreTrust Custom Sourcing. We do this through a e-auction platform, a reverse auction platform. And it's built on some very relevant contractual experience in each of these categories, in a category that you have. So if you have something that is unique to you, it's very likely that we have done either that exact same custom sourcing agreement or something very similar to it. But the ownership of this whole process falls on us, right? So we're going to do all the market research. We're going to make sure that we have all the appropriate vendors put into the correct play or into the RFP. We are going to do, the sourcing project after we had, have done all the RFP development, et cetera. And then again, we're going to present these results to you, and then you decide whether you want to go with company A, B, or C. And then once that is, we'll work that through implementation and help with the contract award, just to make sure that you guys are purchasing off that agreement in order for you to get the value that had come through in that custom sourcing event. So again, you have our GPO agreements, and if a category that you have does not fall underneath our GPO, we have this custom sourcing that is available for you to take advantage of. All right, so now the process of becoming a member and then what that value is. All right, so we have some, what I'm gonna call some requirements that we would need to look at. What I'm gonna say the first one is $1 million in total volume. I'm gonna be honest, and also 3 core list categories in order to evaluate what this membership looks like. What I want to be honest here on is this is meant to scare people away, right? It's not that we want you to not become a member of CoreTrust. We want to make sure that the right members with the right types of spend and the right value that we can provide to your organization is joining. And here's what I mean by that. If you have $100,000 in spend for a category and you're only wanting to look at CoreTrust or any GPO for that matter for that one category, even if we save you 10%, right, the savings value, it's just not quite there. But if you have an overall value or volume that you are bringing that's $1 million and above, and we save 10%, just to use an example, that's meaningful spend. That's meaningful savings for you. And so it makes the engagement for you worth it, because you can go back to your company and book some savings that's pretty substantial. There's obviously some leeways in this, right? Because what we're wanting is a valued member, somebody that's going to reach out with us, work with us, try to gain more categories. So don't feel like discouraged or that you can't engage with CoreTrust if you don't have that $1 million in spend. We're looking for that member that's going to engage with us. So if it's less than $1 million, so be it. But we just wanted to put these up there in the very beginning in order to just have at least a conversational piece. All right. Another of these member requirements here is our supplier compliance thresholds. So many of our categories are what we have a contracted term defined as a committed category, to use an example. By definition, a committed category means that 80% of your spend will be able to flow through that agreement. So for example, if you're spending $1 million in office supplies, then we are expecting $800,000 of that to come through the CoreTrust agreement. Again, many of our contracts that we have with our suppliers have those compliance thresholds in those agreements. And so by engaging with us, we need to make sure that we are hitting those for those categories that have those requirements. And again, the more you get to involved with us, that is a defined term as a committed category. Not all of our categories are committed categories, but the ones that are do have that 80% compliance tag to them. And then finally, it's no conflicting RFPs or benchmarking. You got to keep in mind that we are a professional sourcing organization, and the suppliers that we have on contract, we have already put through a very rigorous RFP process. And so having our suppliers compete in your RFP, again, if you go back to us or you having that direct relationship with the suppliers, we wouldn't be the ones that would be replying to the RFP anyway. It would be our suppliers. So they may choose to reply to your RFP, but it very likely will not be the CoreTrust program being replied to in your RFP. So again, if you're dead set on running an RFP, that's up to you. But that kind of defeats the purpose of working with the GPO, because we have already done this for you and done this on your behalf. And with you wanting to do that, that enables you to get kind of bogged down into the tactical side of procurement that, again, we're kind of taking that part away from you, and you can really focus on the strategic side of sourcing, of procurement. And by joining, for a category and foregoing the RFP, you're able to really focus on that. And then the last thing here on no benchmarking, I like to use the example that, I've had a couple of members and potential members that one of their largest customers, was an office supply supplier. And so by reaching out to me, which is I have their competing office supply supplier on contract, by reaching out to me, they're seeing what the office supply value would be with zero intention of moving, right? Because if they were to disrupt that, that's their largest customer. They don't want to do that. So they want to keep buying from that supplier because, again, that's their largest customer. But what that enables them to do is see what the market looks like, but actually not taking it to market, right? Because they're not doing an RFP. So if your intention is to just see what we have on agreement with no intention of moving, it's something that we try to very much discourage and try to stay away from, and ask our members to not engage us if they have no intentions of moving those categories. All right, so now path to membership. After introduction and you want to move forward and say, okay, what do we do next? Then, we want to get an NDA signed. We're going to be passing a lot of information back and forth with each other. And so we need to make sure that it is a mutual NDA that has GPO language in it. Right? Many of you, have mutual NDAs at your touch, or have access to a mutual NDA. But what we would ask is that we do use ours because our NDA does have that GPO language already in it. If we do use yours, even though it's mutual between a supplier and a company. And so we will have to take out that very specific supplier information and insert that very specific GPO language. So sometimes it just makes it easier to use ours. But at the end of the day, we just want to get a signed NDA with both companies, so it doesn't really matter which one we go with, as long as we just get that part done. All right, and then get the NDA completed, and then we start passing information back and forth. And that's where we are going to, again, I'm going to use the example of office supplies. We want to make sure that we have the complete details in order for my cost analytics team to do a pricing analysis for what your contract is compared to ours. Because we have that NDA in place, you are able to share this information with me because that's all governed by that document. But again, to use the example of office supplies, it's your manufacturing pricing, it's a description, unit of measure, what your volume is, and your pricing. Yes, we do expect all the information that you would need to source a category in order for us to do that evaluation. Multitude of reasons for that. For one, we want to make sure that we're doing right by our suppliers and not just handing out a very detailed pricing file that's based on multi-millions of dollars worth of aggregation. Right? That's what we owe our suppliers. We've already done that through an RFP with them. They've earned and been awarded that RFP. And so we want to respect that by not just handing out the pricing. Number two, as we do all these analysis on behalf of all of our members, that's in essence doing a market check. And so we're making sure that the contract that we have stays relevant. And if there's bits and pieces that are not becoming market relevant, then when that contract is up for renewal and renegotiation, that we have the ability and the ammunition in order to better that contract for our members. So we'll get that information. It'll go over to our cost analytics department. We will then review that savings assessment with you. That's where we'll go into the details, and where I asked for your pricing, that is where you would then get my pricing back to where it's fully unlocked, the analysis that we provide. And you and I will go through that, or your CoreTrust representative will go through that with you to make sure you fully understand the assessment that we did. We do our assessments, again, to use office supplies as an example, on a like-for-like basis, right? We're not substituting a name brand for an off brand in order to show you savings. We are doing an exact like-for-like savings. Then that's part of what this assessment review. Then we will go through where we can make some changes to even further drive that savings value for you. But the assessments are going to be at like-for-like. Assuming that contractual value, the financial value is there. Also, since the NDA is in place, you have full visibility into what our contracts are. So if the savings assessment shows value and the contract that you review shows value, then we would move on to that participation agreement. That's that governing document that I was talking about, where we will go through what those look like of what the terms and conditions look like on how you and I will work together. Again, in the back of it is that exhibit to where you will literally check a box for the category that you want to opt into. You have access to all of our agreements, but you're not opting into the agreements until you put them on this exhibit in the back. So once you do that, everything gets executed. We then notify suppliers, and then the implementation will begin. And depending on the category, implementation can be a few weeks, or it can be longer. All that depends on the category, and also when your either current contract may term, or whatever it may be. But many of our agreements you are able to term those agreements early in order to opt into ours. Okay, so membership value. To kind of sum this up, you're gaining leverage that you may not have on your own. Again, to use the example of office supplies, if you have $1 million in spend, and we're $400 million in spend, at least thereabouts, and so you're gaining access to leverage that you may not have. Speed to savings, right? The time that it takes you to to do the RFI, do the research, run your RFP, do your negotiations, and ultimately make your award, that could be anywhere from a couple of months to several months. And so by engaging with the GPO, again, you're letting us since we've already done this, you're letting us handle that tactical side of your procurement. And you focusing more on that strategic side, you're able to see the value for your organization much quicker. That whole process we just talked about is very dependent on how fast your legal can turn. Our legal turns these things pretty fast. Can turn the participation agreement red lines. So assuming that can be turned pretty quick, then the speed to savings is a couple of months, maybe. And so, and again, in lieu of spending the 6 months to run an RFP and start implementation, you're starting implementation in a month to a month. So your company is then able to realize that savings much quicker than what they do if you would have gone through a whole RFP process. And then finally, bandwidth. So bandwidth, this is important because if you have 10 categories that are on your list as a category manager, and 2 of these CoreTrust does really well, and you can engage with us to knock those 2 categories off and literally check your box and get savings for your organization and hit your goals, then you can go work on the other 8 that are on your list, or engage in custom sourcing for some of those. But at least you have the ability for these 2 to engage in these quickly. The categories are built on aggregation. Our reputation will precede ourselves to where the agreements that we have are spot on, right? There's not a whole lot that's going to be missed. You might give up, net 45. You may have net 60 payments, and we have net 45 payment terms. So you may be giving up those 15 days in order to get 15% in savings, whatever that may be. But point being, we can help with your bandwidth. And we like to view ourselves as sitting on the same side of the table as you, because our ultimate goal here is to provide savings and value for our members. So leverage, speed to savings, and bandwidth.
Well, thank you very much, Tripp, for that great summary of just the value of a GPO and specifically CoreTrust as well. Now we will move into the panel discussion portion of our discussion here. Can we bring in Kyle Kramer as well to help answer some questions? Hi, Kyle. Thanks again. Let me start with a question for you, Kyle, and that is, in this whole idea, as I said, of low-hanging fruit, the Easywin categories, how do you pick those? And maybe it's a good way to get started with a GPO, but how do you go about identifying and picking those categories that could be qualified as easy wins?
Yeah, Bob, thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. At CoreTrust, we have a file that could really help us out with that and help identify those. It's a core category file where we've identified 20 to 25 categories that we have seen success across our membership in both value and in terms and conditions for that. We send it out to every potential member and also current member and start conversations with it. CoreTrust was built off of four main pillars. So rental car, office supplies, IT, and small parcel. So those are typically the ones that we start with and really ask the member if they have any categories that they're looking for that specific year as well for their strategic plan.
Thank you. Trip, you described how CoreTrust manages the contract and the contract cycle. And I'm just wondering, what is the philosophy there? Why is that the case?
Yep. So the reason we do that is because we're the party to the contract, right? CoreTrust is and the supplier are the party to the contract. And with the ability for us to use the aggregation in order to bring more value to our members' organization, we're able to pull all that data together, and that's what we use the RFP, and that's what we ultimately are awarding with. At the end of the day, though, it's you as the member that are the ones that are going to be buying off these agreements. And before I go any further than that, we use these agreements also. Every one of these agreements that we have into place, we also use them. If you go back to what I was saying earlier about HCA being, the largest for-profit hospital company in the country, they are $1 into every one of the agreements that we have in place. So know that. And so we're using all these agreements. But just like how you have stakeholders, we have to have stakeholders. So we are presenting, again, to the example that I used earlier, we're the engine that runs the RFP. We have to present that value to our stakeholders that are going to be the ones that are going to ultimately make the decision whether we go with this supplier versus this one, or do we do both, right? And because whatever those RFP results are going to dictate that, but it's ultimately going to be our members and our advisory boards that make that decision. And so that's when the contract comes into place. Second half of that is that contract management piece. Right? Since we are managing the agreement in play, and just like you guys, we're going to sign it for a 2, 3, 5 year term, whatever that may be. So our contract managing team and our strategic sourcing team are managing the price increases, decreases, all the terms and conditions that go into that agreement. They're managing those on behalf of our entire collective. So they're taking that off of your plate so you can focus on other things inside your organization.
Well, obviously, contracts are the very base of the value that you have for your clients and the like. But I'm just wondering, outside of the contracting aspect, I wonder what other ways CoreTrust might add value to its members, whether in the term of market updates or logistics or the like, and how it goes about optimizing relationships with its various members. Kyle, could you address those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of the contracts and the value that we like to bring inside of those contracts, we have market updates that are out there. We send out a monthly newsletter. It goes to all of our members that we have in our systems and customer relationship manager. So we send that out to them. It has all sorts of different updates in there. We have new members. We have updates within specific industries, like you had mentioned, Bob, logistics as well. It's an ever evolving industry. So it's good to have information and specialized subject matter experts here within CoreTrust that can provide that information to our membership. Yeah. And then, oh, go ahead.
Okay, well, no, I just wondering, I want to get back to this idea of control, whether a company participating in GPO might fear that it's somehow losing control over spend. And Tripp did describe the way that you still have some kind of a direct relationship with a supplier. But I just wondering, is there the possibility, Kyle, of a member company losing direct contact with the reps of suppliers based on the CoreTrust model?
Yeah, absolutely not. We actually encourage it. Like Tripp had mentioned, you have that direct operational relationship with your supplier. At the end of the day, you're not procuring anything from CoreTrust. You're not being invoiced by CoreTrust. You're not paying us anything either. So ultimately, you're buying from them. You'll still have a local rep for each one of those specific vendors that you have elected into. And you're able to communicate with them on day-to-day operations. CoreTrust is here for an additional layer of support if you need it. But we really want you to be able to work with those vendors on a day-to-day basis and really and continue that relationship.
Kyle, how do you start the process of membership with CoreTrust? I mean, Tripp described some of the requirements of membership, and those were quite clear. But just how do you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so typically it starts with an introductory call with one of the team members here at CoreTrust. We really get an understanding of what you're looking to do and how you want to operate with CoreTrust and how you want to engage. It will start with that NDA that Tripp had mentioned, so that we're able to run those analyses that we want to and look at those specific categories that you have out there. That might be your targets for that specific year. So that's the biggest piece is getting through the NDA. After that, he had mentioned during the process to membership phase, we'll do those analyses in-house here at CoreTrust. We'll set up a call to make sure that you understand all of those pieces to the analyses. And then if everything looks great, it brings value to your organization, we'll set up and get that participation agreement drafted for you and sent out. Once that's completed and through legal, we'll go ahead and begin implementation with that specific vendor. And then, CoreTrust takes a step back. So we're still there throughout the entire implementation process to make sure it's going smoothly, set up properly. But that's where, again, that direct operational relationship, Bob, will be set into place. Those local teams, those national teams will be there to assist.
Tripp, you already talked about the issue of being in or out of particular contracts that are owned by CoreTrust, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how a company can work with CoreTrust outside of these already set contracts.
That's right. And so that's that custom sourcing group that I talked about, that I was referring to. So what it enables us to do is to tackle areas of spend that for you, our member, on categories that we don't have. And one of the things that I should have mentioned earlier, as I said this, there's not any cost for you as a member to join CoreTrust. I can't believe I didn't bring this up earlier, because this is going to segue into this whole thing. There's no cost for you to join CoreTrust. The membership and our revenue, basically, for that matter, is fully supplier funded. And as we build these agreements, both custom and part of our core GPO agreements, right, as we build them, inside those T's and C's is our revenue stream. It's called an administrative fee. So there's zero cost to you. And that goes for both our custom sourcing as well as just our regular GPO agreements.
The GPO market is huge. It's just grown so much in the last few years. Maybe it was started in healthcare. I mean, that was the thing that really the kickstarter, but it's just a gigantic market right now. And I just wondering, Tripp, if you could say, what is it that makes CoreTrust unique in this huge field of players? What sets you apart from others in this space?
That's right. So two things. First one's going to be just our sheer size, like the amount of members that we have, the amount of actual spend that's flowing through our agreements, our broad portfolio that we have, that enables a company to not only join us for office supplies and rental car, but we've got some manufacturing related categories. Again, all indirect, but some manufacturing related categories for logistics and forklifts, to use that as an example, that they can come to one organization for. So one, our size. Mm-hmm. Two, and personally, I think this is probably more impactful than anything based on the other GPOs that are out there. If you go back to what I said about us, being owned by HCA and being an operating division of HealthTrust, well, there's 6 owners of HealthTrust. HCA being the largest. The CEO of HealthTrust, his name is Ed Jones. He is also the executive vice president, chief supply chain officer for HCA. Why that's important, right, is because every one of these agreements that we have in place, right, when there's a decision that has to be made on behalf of the GPO, it's also affecting its largest member, HCA. Okay. Why that's important is because we are using all of these agreements, right? When I go to travel and rent a car, I'm renting the same car that you would be, or the same rental car program that you would be. Okay. I'm using these agreements. Why that's important because we're managing all the agreements together. We have our contract management team that's taking all these. And so if there's a price increase and we elected and agreed to that price increase, yes, that affects you. It's also affecting me because I'm using these agreements. So I'm not just building a category and building a contract, hoping that somebody will go use it. We're building these agreements and these categories because we need them too, and we're using them too. And our money, our PO was number one into every one of these agreements that we've built. No other GPO can say that.
Okay. Kyle, I think the two of you have made a pretty strong argument for the value proposition of CoreTrust and GPOs generally to members. But what about suppliers? I mean, is it more than just a way of them, having to cut their prices because a GPO has the power to bargain them down? What's the value of this whole model to a supplier?
Yeah, great question, Bob. So for our suppliers, Trip, myself, and the rest of our sales team are really an extension of their sales team. We're going out on their behalf and engaging with these members who they might not be able to get into the door with. So, for instance, any of the different categories that are out there, they may not be able to get there and really understand and talk to the correct people. A lot of times for them, it starts with a cold call, whereas we're already speaking with parts of their procurement team that can then do a warm introduction for us. So they look at us and utilize us to really help them get in the doors for places that they may not be able to.
So Kyle,
Bob. Hey, Bob, I want to add one thing to that.
Please do, Trip.
Because I think this is also important. The suppliers through that RFP process, they've gone through a very rigorous process. So they've earned the award of this agreement. Part of that earn there is, to Kyle's point, we're an extension of their sales force, so to speak, because we're representing them as we're going into these members. But they're gaining market share, right? So if you look at everything that, with that award, and then as I'm going out or Kyle's going out and we're talking to, a potential new member about the value of our program, and they're not with our contracted supplier, and that business gets converted over to them, that's them gaining market share. And so That's a huge value to those suppliers, huge value.
Great. Good point. At this point, I'd like to bring the audience in. We have a lot of good questions from the audience for these guys, and we only have a limited amount of time in which to address them. So let's start on let's do this audience Q&A. Let's start with a simple question for Kyle, and that is, how is CoreTrust paid?
Yeah, good question, Bob. So we're actually vendor funded, so free membership for our members. We are paid is what they call an administrative fee on the spend that comes through for a specific contract. So a member spends $1 million in office supplies. We are paid a small administrative fee. It's typically around 3% on that $1 million that's coming through from that vendor.
Thank you. With these additional questions, I'm just going to kind of throw them out and see who wants to take them first. But how about this one? It says, what is the process by which a vendor becomes a preferred vendor on the CoreTrust platform?
All right. So it's not a small process. For one, and this goes very simple or very similar to what would be like what you would have. You got to be ready for it. Meaning your contract's terming in a couple, a year. The timing of it has to be right. Market conditions, even for that matter, it need to be right for us to go out and solicit that agreement. Just to use as an example, in 2020, if you tried to go do or even really into 2021, if you tried to go do a pallet RFP, you would have seen astronomical prices just because of what the lumber market had done. So it just wasn't time to do that. Mm-hmm. So all that to be said, there is a supplier function on our website, I believe. And so if you are a potential supplier and you want to become a part of an organization, there's a questionnaire that you can fill out. And then it quite simply comes to timing. And then, if you're a part of, category X, we're going to do our own due diligence. We're going to make sure that the right players are in the market. But probably most importantly, does our membership have a need for this category? And so we want to go ahead and make sure that we are engaging the right folks, the timing is the right folks, and then we'll do a whole RFP for that category.
Great, thank you. This questioner says, our organization is small and we've associated with another GPO. Are you saying that we would not be welcome to join your GPO if we want to be a member but do not want to sign the contract, stating that we will use the majority of our spend with CoreTrust?
Yeah, so probably the wrong choice of words that I used when I said that. We do have smaller members that are a part of our organization. If I was to define our sweet spot, it's probably 2 to 25 billion in revenue would be the sweet spot that we would have. Yes, we have many that are smaller, and we have several, I'm gonna say, that are larger. So if you're, smaller, that's okay. That goes to that point of, we want to have you to have the ability to have $1 million, but if you're so small that you can't get there, it's okay with us. We just want an engagement. Right? We want you to be in, a multitude of categories. You don't have to be, right? What we don't want is for somebody to sign up for $100,000 in office supplies and that's it, right? For one, it dilutes our membership from our supplier, because then our supplier is signing up, smaller companies, so to speak, for only that, and then they know that they're only in that one category, and the stickiness, I guess, may not be there by having that company just be in that one category. And so, I'm not saying no. I'm saying talk to us. We would be glad to have that discussion. We're not saying that you have to have the majority of your spend with us, but we do want an engagement.
Here is a very timely question that's popping up in any discussion about procurement today. And the question is, do you include ESG, that is environmental, social, and governance and diversity goals for your customers in vetting your suppliers?
Take that one, Kyle. You want me to take it?
Go ahead. You're good.
All right. So the short answer is yes. And ESG is a big topic, obviously, for everything that's going on today, for sure. A lot of the agreements that we have, they are, built on the ability for a company to have, a national footprint, number one. But two, these suppliers have those same goals that they want to hit. And so that's a long answer to say, yes, it's important. And I'm gonna say it's going to be very category specific as to what those goals are.
And to add on to that, if you don't mind, real quick, Bob, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
We have that listed out. So we have a full list of category portfolios that will identify this for you as well. So, the full category listing has it's in an Excel file. It has a column in there that will tell you yes or no for the diversity piece on there too.
Yeah. At a time when these concerns are so strong for brand protection and reputation, obviously it has to be more than just a question of price when you take on a long-term supplier through your contract. So that's a good point. This questioner is just asking you to define terms here. It says Tripp mentioned that most of the members are mid to large corporations. Can you define what you mean by mid to large? And can a small company, and I guess you define that as well, can a small company be a member?
Yep. So that's pretty similar to the answer I just gave a little bit ago, where that sweet spot's that, probably 1 to 2 billion to, 20, 25 billion in revenue. That would be what I would call that our sweet spot. Yes, we have some bigger, some smaller. And again, if you're smaller, I want to be clear on it. It's not me saying you can't engage. If you want to engage with us, let's go. The point I'm making is that if you're spending $10,000 in a category and we save you 10%, that's not meaningful. Mm-hmm. Right? The cost of change may be way more than what you're even saving, or even the amount of time that you're going to go through there, just to have $1,000 in savings just may not be there. And so as the spend gets larger, the savings becomes more meaningful for your organization as well. And so that's really where I'm getting. So if you're a smaller company, engage with us. Absolutely.
Great. Questioner says, what is the minimum and also the average term of a category commitment?
I'm sorry, you want to ask that one more time?
The minimum and in parentheses, and also average term of a category commitment.
So, all right, whoever's answering this question, I'm going to answer this two ways, because depending on what it is, I don't know exactly which way you're asking it. So hopefully I'll answer it with one of these ways. I'm going to answer from a supplier standpoint first. Most of our supplier agreements are what I'm going to say 3 to 5 year agreements. So that's us signing up with them. It doesn't mean that we have firm pricing for 3 years. All that's going to be category specific, and the details of that are going to be category specific. But our supplier agreements are 3 to 5 years. From a membership standpoint, so for a company becoming a member of CoreTrust, That governing document that I talked about, our participation agreement, this is all subject to the terms of what's negotiated in that agreement, but it's a 2-year initial term. And then after, it's an evergreen agreement, right? Never expires, or it evergreens on the anniversary date. And the reason being, it's not a supplier agreement. It's your membership document agreement that grants you a member in the CoreTrust. There's no need to renegotiate those terms year over year. There are termination clauses, again, subject to the negotiation between you and I on what the termination for convenience may be. As an example, most of our agreements are like this: 2-year agreement, it evergreens, and then after that initial term, there's a 90-day notice that you can get out, or that we can terminate the agreement too. And those are for all reasons that would go into the negotiation of the term. But that's where you're able to get out of your supplier agreements. Okay. So again, to be very clear, the CoreTrust document, the membership document, that's evergreen.
Questioner wants to know if you're planning on adding any new categories this year, and if so, can you advise which ones?
So yes, and I'll even say, if like probably many of you, if COVID would not have hit, we would have a multitude of more categories. But obviously our priorities had to shift. We had to adapt, just like you had to adapt. And even though we're what I'm going to call a good solid year and a half, 2 years away from where everything was really just crazy, we still had to make sure that the needs of our members were taken care of on the existing agreements that we had. And of course, all the market fluctuations and the supply chain disruptions and all those things. All that to be said, yes, 100% we're going to be adding new categories. They're going to be in all different aspects of indirect spend, from IT to HR, general indirect, facilities management, yada, 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 all of them. I can't tell you exactly what that looks like today, but it will come. 23, 24, 25, we will add additional categories. Yes.
Such a powerful model that has so much more room for growth. Okay, this is the final question here, or the second to last maybe question here. How do we get a list of suppliers who are in the CoreTrust GPO to see if it's in alignment with what our needs are? Yeah,
that's actually a very, very good question. And just reach out to anybody at CoreTrust. At the very end of this, our Kyle and I's contact information will be on there. Be glad to send it to you. And we would even say, to begin the engagement, that's part of what our discussion would be. Not only on what your low-hanging fruit categories are, what the same categories are that could be considered low-hanging fruit, and see where both of those match up. But also want to be very clear when I say this too. If we just wrote down all the same categories, the same suppliers that you have and what I have, and all we did was just write them down, then we would not be getting the value to our suppliers that we would need. Therefore, we would not get the favorable terms and conditions and pricing. So yes, that's a low-hanging fruit to look at the same categories or same suppliers that we have, but also to engage us in categories that would be conversions, because that's how we're maintaining, the integrity of our membership with our suppliers.
Thank you for that. We are just about out of time. I think we have time for just one final question, and I'm going to direct it to Tripp, and it is as follows. How do I evaluate whether a GPO is right for me?
Yep. So hopefully, with everything that we just discussed, that you're able to digest, take back to your team, take back to your boss and your team leaders, and say, this is something that I believe that we should look at, and here's why. So if you're looking inside your organization and you're able to, well, two things. If you're able to grab data, right, and you're able to see what you have, then you're able to give that data to us to evaluate what that would look like in order for you to join. On the flip side of that, if you look inside your organization and you don't have visibility into a lot of your data, let's say you're not centralized, and again, I'm going to use the example of office supplies. You're not centralized on office supplies. It's a frustrating category because you've got 9 different locations, and all 9 different locations are buying off something different. You're on 3 different ERP systems, and you just can't get the data for some of these categories. Then we're great to join. And here's why. Now you can opt into the agreement, and you can have all 9 of those companies of your locations all buying off the same agreement, which guess what? Now you've got visibility into what your data looks like, where they're spending money. So then after they've been in it a year, you can then optimize that, still utilizing the same contract, but optimizing that to say, all right, here's some of the non-core spend. Let's move to the core to further even dive down into your information. So that would be one. Whether you can get data or can't get data, having to dive into this information. And then back to the point I was saying earlier, same categories, same suppliers. And then Kyle had mentioned our core category listing. That's how what you would look at, engage with what we have, and hopefully it's a great fit for you to drive that savings and value for your company.
Great. Well, I want to thank once again Trip Cates and Kyle Kramer for that great presentation on the value of a GPO, a general purchasing organization, and CoreTrust specifically. Thanks so much, guys, for that. And thank you, audience, for your attendance and for your great questions. Here are some ways that you can contact our 2 speakers going forward. I'm sure they would be only too happy to speak to you more about the model of CoreTrust and GPOs. There they are, Trip Cates and Kyle Kramer. So once again, everybody, thanks so much for listening in. Everyone, have a great day.